Infinite love here now, and now, and now. In fact, there's no now when it isn't, because all of it is infinite love. Spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, is infinite love. Freedom is love in action. Choice is love in action. Growth is love in action. It's all God. It's all here now, all the time. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to know that for myself. I'm grateful to know that for each of us. We are each of us expressing the love, growth, freedom, and choice by being here now. And in this togetherness is the physical expression of love and connection and growth. I choose to come where I am growing. I choose to live on that growing edge. To say it's not a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. To say it is always choice, that all of the possibilities in the universe are mine right now. And today, I am choosing this. In this moment, I am choosing this. And I am so grateful because I feel filled. I feel overflowing with that wonder, that choice, that good. Those little voices of joy, the good that is ours together. So today I support and celebrate this co-creation of this community, whatever it looks like. However we co-create in every moment the next new moment, focusing on how we want to feel, how it feels to be in fabulous connection with others, and then calling that into our world right now. So I do that. I say, this is good, and more of it is good, and tomorrow it's going to be gooder. Choice, freedom, love. Thank you, Spirit, for all of it. So letting these words go into that law, in deep gratitude, in deep joy, I say, and so it is.
So our talk today is called The Turbulence of Love. Yes, right? So a couple of definitions. Turbulence is fluid motion characterized by chaotic changes. How many have noticed there's some chaotic changes in your life? Okay. Chaotic changes in pressure and flow velocity. This is for all you physics majors here. It is in contrast to laminar flow, which occurs when a fluid flows in parallel layers, with no disruption between these layers. Turbulence is commonly observed in everyday phenomena such as surf, fast-flowing rivers, billowing storm clouds, or smoke from a chimney or candle, and most fluid flows occurring in nature are turbulent. Turbulence is natural. Yes? Turbulence is natural. Take a breath. The other definition of turbulence, I'm sorry, we have an airline pilot, Craig, who's oftentimes here. I'm sorry he's not here, but clear air turbulence. How many of you experienced clear air turbulence if you've been in an airplane? You know, right? I was flying into Salt Lake City one time, and the plane dropped 200 feet just like that. Even what am I trying to say? The flight attendants, thank you, were a little shaken by that. And it was definitely, that's a big drop, bang. And it's caused by, Salt Lake City is rimmed by mountains, and so one of the things that creates air turbulence is the flow of air up from the mountains into that. So Clear air turbulence is caused when bodies of air moving at widely different speeds meet. Have you ever been a body of air moving at a widely different speed than people around you? Or you've noticed that within yourself? So that's the turbulence that we're talking about. One of my early teachers, Sandra Ray, had a saying that said, love brings up anything unlike itself for the purpose of healing and release. And it's that second part that's important to pay attention to, for the purpose of healing and release. And by the way, that can be said about any, I consider love to be a quality of the divine. And so any of those qualities of the divine, if I go for joy, if I go for power, if I go for peace, will bring up anything unlike itself so that we can move through it, so we can heal it and release it. Yes? So, thank you. Somebody's paying attention. Love doesn't create the turbulence. Our resistance to love creates the turbulence. Take a breath. We have an image of can you put that little candle image up there? So the smoke begins as a stable column. This is an image of smoke rising from a candle. The smoke begins as a stable column, but soon begins to break down. Yes? As it encounters other influences. Our thoughts can be like this. You may have noticed. We start with a single thought, which then encounters other thoughts that our brain thinks are similar. And because our brain links, orders, and sorts and tries to put everything together in a way that makes sense to it, in its process of attempting to make sense, so we can start with the thought of peace. We can meditate on peace. And the brain responds by linking past experiences of ideas of peace, which is not the same as the direct experience of peace, yes? But the brain goes for ideas about peace. But attached to those ideas are also stories of not peace, yes? Because we have both sitting in our brain. And they get triggered when our neighbor starts their weed whacker while we're in the deep meditation in the backyard. Yes? And suddenly, though we began with peace, we are deeply into not peace. And all the attached feelings, and we blame who? Our neighbor. And his dang weed whacker. When it's really our mind, our own mind, that has created non-peace about that. And voila, we have turbulence. Richard Rohr uses a model called the cosmic egg, which is a four-layered way of observing reality, of observing life. And the first layer of that cosmic egg is called my story. This is my own personal story. And then we have our story, which is usually the group that's right around us. It's our family, it's our friends, it's our religion, it's our country, it's our race, it's our story, whatever we define as our group. There's a third process called other stories. Dang it, there's other stories. Did you know that? There's other stories besides mine and ours? Other stories. And then finally, there's what he calls the, capital T story, capital S story, which is the cosmic story, the highest viewpoint story. In religious science, we tend to call that the capital T truth. We used it in a song early this morning. So my story and our story tends to keep us locked up encountering other seems to keep us locked up and spinning around just in our stories. And I think it's real. I think it's the way that everybody views the world. And then we encounter other stories, which creates turbulence. Suddenly we realize that not everybody thinks like a middle-class white person in our country. Yes? What? Not everybody thinks the same as men do in the country. Blasphemy, I know. We encounter other cultures. I was recently at Banff, and I was walking back from something, and there's a number of Asian people from China who come there, and I've noticed this in people from China who were born and raised there, that they do things on the left side of the road. We drive on the right side of the road. Yes? And huh? We drive on the correct side, the right side of the road, you know, until we go to China, Japan, or England, yes? And then we encounter other stories. And so I was walking down some stairs from a viewpoint, and an Asian couple was walking up the stairs on their left side, which is how they pass in Asia, in China. You know, and it was just a moment of, we didn't crash into each other. It was just a moment of looking at other cultures, other influences, other ways of doing things. Can you imagine if we were driving in England sticking to my story? The right side. I'm going to teach these stupid Brits the right way to drive. I'm going to drive down the right side of the road. What's going to happen? Turbulence. Collision. We encounter this, one of my favorite ways to watch this is in people who are newly together, newly married, newly coupled in some way or other. And they run into, how do we celebrate Christmas for the first time ever? Or they run into, how do we deal with the toothpaste? Cap on, cap off, squeeze from the bottom, squeeze from the top. Does it care? Does it matter? How we arrange the chairs in the sanctuary. Other stories. And we're conditioned to believe that those outer circumstances, those conditions, people, and situations cause our feelings. We can say oftentimes, you make me feel so mad, sad, glad, or scared, yes? You make me feel. But the uncomfortable truth is we make ourselves feel mad, sad, glad, or scared about that person, circumstance, situation, thing. Take a breath. Dang, I hate that. I mean, when I get mad at Buffy, it's Buffy's fault. It can't possibly be because she's triggered off something within me. We don't get mad at each other very often, so I'm just teasing. And we are not a couple, I know some of you are new here. We are not a couple. We're just have been around this center for a long time and play with each other. Her husband is not in the room. Okay, Mark, he's here. And so what the external situation does is triggers off stories that are already within us. We already have these stories running, which are often the very stories and feelings that are keeping us from living in love, that are keeping us from having hearts that are fully open and experiencing that, from experiencing and living as our divine self, from experiencing and living the capital T, the capital S story. There's a lovely phrase in the Course in Miracles which aggravates me every time I read it. It makes me mad. And got that? And it says, you're never upset for the reason you think you are. We are never upset for the reason we think we are, which is a wonderful process for taking a step back and saying, okay, I'm upset. What am I think it's about that or that person. What am I really upset about? We are the divine in human form. We are the divine in human form. Nudge your neighbor and say, you are the divine in human form. You are the divine in human form. We are the divine wanting to experience and express more of itself. And its nature is to expand. Yes? That's just its nature. But our human conditioning, Mark Nepo has a quote in there that says, we are divine, we are the freedom of the divine living in a human house that has holes in it. And I will say that the holes are where the divine gets in, yes? So it's not a bad thing that we have holes in our human house. Our human conditioning are clinging to the safety of my story, our story, which the ego sees as necessary for its self-preservation, because the ego is simply a collection of stories. You know, we all think that I am this. How many of you have taken personality tests? Yeah? And you're absolutely certain, okay, here's my personality. If you come back a year later and take that same test, you'll have a different personality if you've been doing any kind of growth at all. Because your story and the stories of our ego are made up based on memories, based on social circumstances, based on current conditions. We decide who we are going to be. Have you ever noticed that you're sometimes different you interact in one way with one friend and another way with other friends, or particularly strangers, are you a different person? No, you're the ego adapting itself to what it thinks is appropriate for that circumstance. So the ego is simply a collection of stories, and it fears that if it lets go of its story, it's going to do what? Die, collapse, cease to exist. And so as spiritual beings in human form, there are two different flows happening within us, right? We got the flow of the divine saying, expand, expand, and the ego saying, contract, contract, protect. One for expansion, one for constriction, and voila, turbulence. We can take that image, let go of that image. So how do we fly through turbulence? Well, we can learn that by an airplane, right? If you're in an airplane and the airplane encounters turbulence, it just turns around and goes home, right? Yeah, you fasten your seatbelt. So the first way we fly through turbulence is by keeping our eye on the destination. We may have to do some adjustments, but we keep our eye on the destination. When we see this newlywed couple that I just talked about experiencing turbulence about the collision of stories about holidays or toothpaste, if they get lost in my story is the right story, my way is the right way, they'll crash. The relationship will fall apart in the turbulence. If instead they keep their eye on the importance, what's important in the relationship, what's important is the love. If they keep their eye on the love and the harmony and on what brought them together and their purpose in being together, then that becomes more important than the toothpaste. Yes? Yes? Hopefully. And they will come through the turbulence. And not only will they come through the turbulence, but the relationship will be strengthened because they came through the turbulence. When I was going to Banff, I was hanging out at a dinner party one night with some people who had been married for 47 years and another couple who had been married for 48 years. My longest marriage lasted for 6.5 years. 47 years is inconceivable to me. But it is something I would have liked to have experienced sometime in my life. I don't think I have 47 years left to, anyway. And what they did was they talked about that they have encountered turbulence and they go through it. They get over it. They get past it. And they're stronger for it. And so turbulence, rather than being something we should turn around from and avoid and say, oh, I don't want this in my life, is an opportunity to get stronger if we keep our eye on the destination, on what's really important here. And when they expand that, then they create an expanded our story, which includes other stories. See, if we as a country are going to get stronger, we have to include other stories, yes? Not just white patriarchal male stories. Sorry. Well, they struck by lightning by the Christian God? I don't think so. We have to open that up. And so this takes understanding their why. In order to move through the relationship, we have to understand our why. And we're getting ready as a community to start to work on our strategic plan. What is the destination that we want to fly to over the next 3 to 5 years? And so it starts with understanding what is our why. What is it that we want to create? What is it that we as a community want to create together for moving the center forward? We need to understand, share, and commit to our why, to a deeper purpose than just hanging out in the airport terminal with our friends, having a nice party while the plane sits on the ground unused. Yes? Yeah. So if we choose to truly be a center for spiritual living, that's both us individually and collectively, nudge your neighbor and say, you are a center for spiritual living. Or you are a center for spiritual living. Or at least we have the opportunity to be that. So as we do this, we're going to encounter what? Turbulence. As the impulsion of the divine within us seeks to experience and express more of its nature, and it runs up against our human conditioning. Isn't that wonderful? Woohoo! And it'll get triggered, and which leads us to the next way to deal with turbulence, which is seeing turbulence as a gift and opportunity to grow. I know it's one of Susan's favorite phrases in AFOG. Another fantastic opportunity for growth, right? Yes. So seeing turbulence as an opportunity to grow deeper, rather than something to be avoided. How can I move into this? How can I grow through this? How can I learn more about myself? The turbulence is revealing what's going on in my own subconscious mind that I might not be aware of until I hit turbulence. It's an opportunity to open up more fully to experiencing and expressing our divine nature. And a great example of this, I love this when this came to me, the idea of love languages. Remember love languages? You know, a few years ago it was all the rage, you know, and there's 5 love languages. So there are 2 ways to approach love languages. The limiting ego attached to my story says, this is my love language, and I can't feel love unless you love me in exactly this way. That's called my story. And it also says things like, if you really love me, you would fill in the blank. How many of you have heard that in relationship? Not your relationship, but you've seen, you know people, right? The divine mind within says, wow, look at all the ways I can be loved. I can be multilingually loved. There's 5 different ways, at least 5 different ways, probably more. To expand, to play, to experience more, thus creating a more free-flowing and more abundant experience of love. Different way than, you've got to love me just this way or I can't accept it. Take a breath. So the limiting mind, which creates turbulence, although it believes turbulence is being created out there, right? That's the limiting mind, always thinks it's out there. Looks for people and things to blame, usually not itself. The divine mind, open and curious, asks, what within me is creating this turbulence? Take a breath. Your little ego mind right now is stomping its foot and going, no, it's really that person out there. So I invite us to breathe into our sacred mind, our divine mind, our expansive mind. And that mind recognizes that feelings are the voice of our beliefs. We talked about mountains creating wind. Our beliefs are our mountains, and the feelings are the wind that it creates. Our feelings are the voice of our beliefs. And rather than insisting that others change to make us more comfortable, i.e. more stuck in our story, we need to get excited about the opportunity to discover another way, that it has been holding off love and looks to heal it. We discover a way that we've been holding off love. If I'm angry at somebody or something, that's within me, and I get to discover what is it within me that's being triggered by that person. And that frees up a whole lot more energy. And often this discovery and the healing that needs to take place needs support from others. Oftentimes we can't do it because we're operating in a blind spot. We're operating in my story is the story, yes? Yes? So we need some support. We need help from people like practitioners and other trained guides that who both have the skill and are not caught up in our story. Not caught up in my own story. Other times we can have experiences that will rattle our story. You know, we think the world is a certain way, and all of a sudden something comes up and it shakes our awareness that it's not really that way. I remember when I was young, I was working for Aetna Life and Casualty when I was in my early 20s, and I come out of a fairly abusive home, and I'd gone to, they sent me to their office in Hartford, Connecticut, and I made a pretty good and pretty costly mistake in the process that I was doing. And I expected to be chewed out, humiliated, perhaps even fired. And instead, my boss and his manager said, oh, well, okay, if that's what happened, then we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we got to do this. And they just started solving the problem. There was no humiliation. There was no, and I literally stood there for a moment going, oh my God, the world doesn't work the same way that my house did. It was a moment. And I looked at them and I said, aren't you going to, do some reactions I expected? And they just kind of looked at me surprised, like, huh? I said, no, if you made that mistake, it's because we didn't train you well enough. They took responsibility for my mistake. Trust me, that was a whole shift in my awareness of how the world could operate. So ultimately, going for love shakes us loose from our limiting stories. The ego, the keeper of stories, believing it's going to die. But really, what can happen is that the ego can open up and incorporate more stories, better stories, healthier stories, more life-giving stories. It gets repurposed into doing something different than protection and constriction. If we use it wisely, the turbulence of love will shake out the baggage we no longer want to carry. If you think of yourself as an airplane with a whole lot of heavy baggage that's keeping you low to the ground and in the turbulence, turbulence will shake out that baggage so you don't have to carry it anymore. And it will lift to new heights, rising on the wings of love. So 2 practices this week that I want to invite you to do. Number 1 is look at an area of your life that seems to be creating turbulence for you, where you're experiencing turbulence. And ask yourself, what story of my own making is being revealed here? And a hint with that, you're never upset for the reason you think you are. And then the second practice is to ask, where is love trying to rise more fully in me and in my life? Where is love trying to rise more fully in me and in my life? And say yes. Are we good with those practices this week? We're going to look at the turbulence instead of ignoring it, instead of pretending, I don't see no turbulence. We're going to just acknowledge how many people here have turbulence in their lives, to some degree or another. It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be a 200-foot drop, but just something rattling the plane, right? And so to play with that, to look at it, to ask, what is it revealing to me, and then how can I be more loving? So I want to close with a quote from Ernest Holmes. The Science of Mind. He says, degenerative thoughts can be turned into creative, energizing, vitalizing ones. In other words, we can take a flow and we can shift it. We can take a flow and change it. He goes on to say, anger can be turned into love, and the very power that has been destroying can be made to build up the entire life. We have that ability, we have that choice. But we have to get out of our story that has been the steady flow of this is how it is, to start to say, there could be another way to look at this, a more empowering way, a more freeing way. We have an affirmation. Join me for this. I am greater than any turbulence I may encounter. Divine love in, through, and as me guides me higher. Let's say it one more time. I am greater than any turbulence I may encounter. Divine love in, through, and as me guides me higher.